Good evening and welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight I will be hosting a US-based economist, Merve Hande Akmehmet, to discuss the economic aspects of Turkish-US relations, and particularly we will be talking about whether the declared $100 billion bilateral trade volume is achievable. But first, some other news. Yesterday, a 5.7 magnitude earthquake shook Istanbul, slightly injuring 34 people and causing panic among the residents.
A 5.7 magnitude earthquake shook Istanbul on Thursday, sending school children and residents into streets and collapsing a minaret of a mosque in Turkey's commercial and cultural center. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Authority said the earthquake struck in the Sea of Marmara and was felt throughout the Western Marmara region, which includes Istanbul.
Tekrar geçmiş olsun hepimize, İstanbul'a, hemşerilerimize.
Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu said on Twitter that there were no reports of deaths from the quake. News videos showed a collapsed minaret in the city's Western Avcılar district, and the emergency agency said cracks were found in some buildings. Turkish media showed children being evacuated from schools and city residents waiting outside their homes. Schools were cancelled for the day. The Kandilli Observatory and Earthquake Research Institute recorded several aftershocks, with the highest at 4.4 magnitude.
It was a busy week for the Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. He was in the US to attend United Nations General Assembly. He also met US President Donald Trump at a reception briefly.
President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan was in New York this week to attend the UN General Assembly's 74th session. In his speech to the General Assembly, Erdoğan proposed an expanded safe zone in northern Syria could include as many as 3 million people and stretch for 80 kilometers as far as Raqqa. In the run-up to the General Assembly, President Erdoğan has been increasingly impatient about the speed with which the US is allowing the safe zone to be established, and he was threatening to push into Syria unilaterally if his plan is rebuffed by the US. Erdoğan was hoping to speak to Trump in person about the issue and has announced that he will make his decision upon returning from New York. Indeed, the two leaders met at reception on Wednesday evening on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Turkey's presidency said on Twitter that Erdoğan had attended the reception and provided a picture showing the Turkish leader and his wife Emine with Trump and First Lady Melania. It gave no other details and did not say whether the two leaders only met or also had talks. Earlier that day, Erdoğan said Turkish-American relations that have been severely tested is now on a better track, thanks to the close dialogue and communication he has established with President Trump. Erdoğan also stressed that the two leaders are focusing on a positive agenda and announced that he expects the US to exempt his nation from any future tariffs due to the strategic partnership between the two countries. US Ambassador to Ankara, David Satterfield, recently gave a presentation at the presidential palace about a possible free trade accord that would include Turkey's participation in the F-35 program as well as the Patriot purchase. US President Donald Trump said Monday that Turkey's president has become a friend following negotiations to free an American pastor from Turkish custody.
Arasındaki bağlar demokratik değerler ve müşterek menfaatler temelinde.
Joining now with us via Skype, Merve Hande Akmehmet. She's a US-based economist and the president of Hologram Networks, which is a political consulting company based in Washington, D.C. Hi, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I have a problem hearing you, but I think, yeah, now I can hear you. Great.
Okay.
I'll start my questions immediately. I hope the connection will not go. As you know, Turkey eyes a free trade agreement with the US, and the President Erdoğan says that the two countries have been taking concrete steps towards achieving $100 billion trade volume. Do you think it can be achieved, and if so, in what terms? I mean, how long would it take? Could you comment on that?
Sure. So currently, the Turkish-American trade volume is around $20 billion. And this is definitely below our true potential. So let's start with that. The announcement of the $100 billion of mutual trade target was actually announced right after the S-400 issue and after President Trump actually sent Senator Lindsey Graham to Turkey to negotiate. From my perspective, this was definitely an attempt from Washington to reverse Ankara's move to purchase the Russian S-400 missile defense systems. Washington actually believes that if Turkey can somehow stand down, in quotation marks, which can have very different variations on the S-400s, a free trade agreement or other sorts of negotiations can take effect and can actually positively affect the Turkish economy as well as the American economy. I think the timing is just politically correct for both sides, for both Ankara and Washington, from a political capital perspective, for both leaders. From my perspective, both countries are definitely looking for different ways to actually overcome this very seismic period of U.S.-Turkey relations, where ties have been severely tested. I'll be watching if actually Turkey and the U.S. can move forward to achieving this $100 billion in a more balanced way, with $50 billion of trade revenue to Turkey and another $50 billion of trade revenue to the U.S. This can definitely be a long-term target. However, I expect the bilateral trade volume to be increased by maybe 8% to 10% in the short run, and maybe 10% to 12% in the longer run. And these are my positive scenarios. Currently, there are 7 prioritized sectors so far, which include textile, furniture, civil aviation, and some other sectors, including construction, which are setting a very good pathway to improve the ties between the two countries. But this should definitely be followed by some other concrete measures, such as maybe possibly reinstating Turkey in the GSP, and lowering the customs duties on steel and aluminum. 2, removing Turkey from the scope of the Section 232, the legislation that actually allows the U.S. president to impose tariffs on national security grounds, which would be very positive. And lastly, definitely agreeing on the biggest elephant in the room, which is Syria. If any of these 3 measures are adopted, then we can expect this trade volume to be much more realistic.
Then I have questions about all of you mentioned, but which one I should start? Maybe one of the positive steps that was you mentioned, for example, that the steel and aluminum taxes to be lowered. I mean, President Erdogan also said that he expects the U.S. to exempt Turkey from any future tariffs, due to strategic partnership, as he put it, between the two countries. Is it realistic to expect it? Because, as you mentioned, it would be a positive step. But will the Trump administration be willing to do that?
Mm-hmm. The sanctions talk, I think, is still a very delicate issue in Washington due to the previous events, let's say. And we know that the Congress was actually considering very severe actions on Turkey under the CAATSA rules after Turkey's S-400 purchase. However, we also know that President Trump's personal position on this issue is more negotiative, trying to seek deals, trying to convince the Republican senators in the Congress that it is still in the United States' interest to apply 5 of the more gentle options out of the 12 options in CAATSA. He can't postpone them all, but at least he can adopt the more gentle sort of versions of the sanctions. It can go softer, but the negotiation aspect unfortunately has many different dimensions as well. The most important ones, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, is Syria, the Kurds, Iran, and especially after the current drone attack in Aramco. So let's say, the drone wars in the region. So these issues are still very fragile, which could affect our relationships which could affect our relationships as well.
I'll come to the other issues, but the President Erdogan was also he was optimistic, I suppose, and he sounded optimistic upon return to Turkey, that Turkey and US are really resolving their problems, and he also stressed that it's due to close dialogue and communication between him and President Trump. And he was optimistic that, as you put it, Trump will go after a softer approach. But I mean, can now we expect the threat of U.S. sanctions over the purchase of S-100s, Russian S-100s, are dispelled? Because, softer approach still hurts,
Absolutely. Well, it looks like there is definitely increased dialogue, which is positive. But there are many different dimensions that can change the dynamics really easily. One of them being Turkey positioning its troops at the Syrian border. It's definitely too early to say anything for the F-35s, but the recent developments, the drone attacks in Aramco actually showed us that nowhere is considered safe and protected anymore. So this was definitely a game changer, for the relations between Turkey and US. The attack on Aramco. Also, another aspect.
Sorry to interrupt, but could you a little bit elaborate on that? Why it is a game changer?
Mm-hmm. The S-400 was definitely considered a soft issue, and Turkey was almost blamed, and and this issue actually caused Turkey to sever the relations, between the two strategic partners. However, this shows us that even a zone as protected as Aramco can be targeted, and nowhere is safe anymore. So maybe purchasing the S-400s as well as other missile defense systems. So Turkey can definitely make a case much more positively than what it was arguing before. I think this definitely strengthened Turkey's hand in explaining why, as a nation, it seeked to purchase S-400 missile systems. Another, issue that might affect Trump's standing on the F-35s is the current situation in Washington. What he is facing is also very different and unique in the United States history as well. Very recently, as you know, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi introduced steps to formally impeach him. So therefore, things in D.C. are very complicated as well.
But as to the defense system, then here comes the Patriots. And President Erdogan said Turkey is willing to buy Patriots, and they are compatible, even if Turkey included in the 535 system, I don't know if it's possible again, back to it, they are all compatible, S-400s, Patriots, and F-35s. Can you see such a thing happening, or?
No, definitely not. This was Washington's main concern, that two systems cannot be activated at the same time. But having said that, I think this is definitely below the threshold of a military misunderstanding. Who buys what, can be put aside, but their geopolitical differences are actually, setting different sides apart. And what they can't agree on are the geopolitical differences on how to tackle the issue in Syria.
And how about this safe zone issue? Maybe you can also briefly mention how it is taken? Because in the General Assembly, while he's speaking, President Erdogan gave a big picture, really, of what he envisions as a safe zone. And still the dialogue is going on with the United States because, yes, they started doing something around the safe zone, but we don't know yet if the deal is done yet. And but evaluating the positive messages coming from Turkey this week, I suppose President Erdogan was positive. Do you think still a unilateral action could be taken by Turkey, or maybe it will be postponed because Turkey would like to see what's going on the trade side and other sides? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think instead of any unilateral action, which is taken by any of the countries involved, or any bilateral action, two countries taking actions together, what we actually need in Syria, because all of those has been tested before with state actors and non-state actors, and we haven't come to any resolution yet. So what is needed is a multi-state, multilateral action plan within Syria. I also believe that Turkey should not be weakened by any of the military and air defense nuances between Russia and the United States. This is putting our national security at jeopardy as well. So from that standpoint, I think the current developments and partnerships are still very preliminary, and it is very crucial to see how they will play out. As part of the safe zone in Syria, what we currently know is that Turkey and the United States are extending their coordination under the Joint Operations Center in Şanlıurfa. This is crucial. Their collaboration in drone activities, the unmanned air vehicles, begun to be carried out in the region. As I mentioned before, we are very much in the middle of a drone war between Israel and other non-state actors backed by Iran in region, especially the Aramco situation and everything. So it's important for Turkey to be part of these missions. But however, this also has to be followed and backed up by political and an economic action plan, including other actors in the region to also participate and make sure that a more realistic approach is being adopted. If not, we will not be, moving to the final stage, unfortunately.
So we should be watching drones really carefully from now on, I suppose. Very briefly, if it's possible, because it's a big question, actually. Turkey is seeking to lift the economy out of a deep downturn brought on by the currency crisis that peaked in August. How do you see it is going so far? I mean, there are recent rate cuts. Will they send a positive message to the global markets and also support the economy, Turkish economy internally?
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately not. I wish I could speak more optimistically, but I see the Turkish economy at a very, very similar state before the 2000-2001 financial crisis. We had been following very unconventional measures, both in monetary policy as well as economic policy, which is, led by the government side. So, these unconventional measures, unfortunately, are not helping at all, and the global markets are not positively, even though we don't see any dramatic fluctuations in the Turkish lira or any big depreciation so far, like what we have experienced last summer. There are global challenges ahead of us. They're coming along our way. So from a very general perspective, and to wrap it up, emerging markets that can actually, like us, that can actually differentiate with a positive economic story will differentiate positively. And unfortunately, the rest of them are going to see currency depreciations in their countries. So, to evaluate Turkey's economy, only from an economic point of view is also not happening anymore, because the political progress and the political story actually came ahead of the curve of the economic development. So that's what everyone is following now.
Merve, Hande, Akmehmet, thank you very much. It was a frank talk and really mind-opening. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And some other news about economy we will be going on. Turkey's government turned from the construction sector to the car industry as it sought to revive economic growth and help out crisis-hit businesses. And thus, 3 Turkish state-owned banks have lowered the monthly interest rates on car loans.
Turkish state-owned lenders
Hande Hanım, sağ
Ziraat,
olun, buradan
Halkbank
sizi
and
dinliyorum.
Vakıfbank have lowered the monthly interest rates on car loans to support local production. They slashed the monthly cost of the 18 36-month loans for passenger cars produced in Turkey to 0.69%. The loans will be made available for first-hand cars. As part of the financing package, the banks have inked agreements with passenger car producers Fiat, Honda, Hyundai, and Renault. The lenders will also extend 30-60-month loans at the monthly interest rates between 0.49% and 6.9% for commercial vehicles produced by Fiat, Ford, Isuzu Karsan, and Temsa. The financing package will be made available between October 1 and December 31. The automotive market narrowed nearly 46% year-on-year in the January-August period.
News from Turkish politics. There are growing signs that attention is building up within opposition İYİ Party as regards to its alliance with main opposition CHP. Here is the latest.
BM Genel Kurulu'nda mazlumluğuna cümle kurduğu onca milletin içerisinde
The İYİ Party spokesperson Yavuz Ağır Alioğlu announced that if the CHP keeps its relations with the HDP intact, the İYİ Party will no longer take part in the Nation Alliance.
Öncelikle aranızda olmaktan duyduğum onuru.
The İYİ Party leader Meral Akşener also commented on the matter when she's asked about CHP's closer relations with the HDP. She said she's not informed about any open and closer communication between them. But she also stressed that, although she's not aware of such an intention on CHP's side, if CHP chooses to partner with HDP for the next elections and asks İYİ Party to join them, it is impossible for them to accept the offer, since, as she put it, HDP is not able to put a distance between itself and the outlawed PKK. These statements show that the ongoing disputes between the two parties has deep-rooted causes. The İYİ Party had been complaining about the CHP's cooperation with the HDP in the appointment of trustees in some municipalities, and the HDP's active involvement with the Nation Alliance during the local elections. Thus, the latent crisis has come to the surface recently. Analysts argue that, although the dispute between the CHP and the İYİ Party cannot be underestimated for the future of this alliance, it is too early to say that the
Yes, it is too early to say that the alliance is collapsing. And that's all for this week. Thank you for watching us.